Welcome to NAMM 2006. This is the MOTU booth. I'm Magic Dave. This is Magic Les. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we are going to entertain and inform you. We have some wonderful things to show you. We're going to roll out the world's premiere of DP5, Digital Performer version 5. This is our flagship audio and MIDI sequencer. A ton of new features to show you in DP5, including 6 new virtual instruments included with Digital Performer. We're going to show you our symphonic instrument version 1.1. Symphonic instrument shipped last year. The 1.1 update, major update, shipped last month. It was a free update. We'll take you through some of those details. And we're going to finish off today's demonstration by showing you our latest virtual instrument. And this is Ethno, World Ethnic Virtual Instruments. Very cool stuff. Alright, so let's start off with DP5, and we'd like to start off by showing you the clip that we're going to be using for our examples. This is the movie Van Helsing, which was scored by Jeff Feynman and Yoav Gorin inside Digital Performer. Let's watch a couple of seconds of the Van Helsing clip.
His name is Van Helsing. What about he's come to battle enemies? Legend, what are we doing now like that?
Yeah, you used to play in a band with that guy. Definitely, that guy plays drums in the band. Alright, let's talk about DP version 5. What's new in DP5? Well, Digital Performer has a waveform editor. It's been there for some time. This is a fully functional waveform editor, destructive waveform editing, changing the waveform on the hard drive. You can use it for mastering, you can use it for working with individual sound bites, and in DP5 we've enhanced the waveform editor. We've put a wiper, a cursor in there, so you can tell exactly where you are in the sequence. We've locked that wiper to the transport controls of Digital Performer, so all of your standard transport controls allow you to work inside the waveform editor. We've given you new selection capabilities in the waveform editor. We've given you a way to manipulate tempo maps inside the waveform editor. Now, a tempo map is information that is put into a piece of audio that tells the audio what its tempo is at any given point. Once audio has a tempo map, you can manipulate the tempo of the audio. Digital Performer will do time stretching and conforming of tempo. So how are we going to find that initial tempo? Well, Digital Performer will look for tempo automatically, or if you have very complex audio with radically changing tempo, you can manipulate that manually. And now what we can do in the waveform editor is basically you drag the bar lines in reference to the audio, and by dragging a bar line you say, okay, this downbeat is the downbeat of a bar, this downbeat is the downbeat of the next bar, and you create a tempo map. So this is the adjust beats feature built into the waveform editor in Digital Performer. What else is new for DP5? Well, let's switch over and take a look at the mixing board. What do we put into the mixing board? Hello, Mr. Van Helsing. Very determined vampire hunter there. Okay, here's our mixing board. You see buttons for each of the tracks: solo, mute, record, and input. Input is a new button in the tracks, and we have a whole series of ways of working with input monitoring. We've got a lot of options. If you want the traditional analog tape recorder style of monitoring the track while you're playing back, and then when you punch in, you monitor the input, automatic input switching, you can do that. If you want to always have the input live, regardless of whether the track is record enabled or not, playing back or not, you can do that. You've got a whole series of options for setting up input monitoring. Another really good example is, let's say you're using Reason software with Digital Performer. I've got audio signals returning from Reason back into Digital Performer. I'm using an audio track to monitor those signals. I'm recording on MIDI tracks, I'm recording on other audio tracks. I'm just monitoring through the Reason signals, and then when I'm ready to print Reason, just put the track in record and hit the record button. So, new input monitoring features in DP5. New editing features. Let's go into the sequence editor. Now, trimming a soundbite means grabbing the edge of the soundbite and basically hiding or revealing the waveform. This is a non-destructive edit, edge editing. Now we have our tool palette, and we have a new trim tool. Instead of having to go all the way to the edge of the soundbite, grabbing it and moving it back, we just click on the soundbite and automatically trim it to that point. Nice convenient feature. If the left hand and right hand edges of your soundbite are way off the screen, you can say, right here, I want to trim to this point. It just does it for you. How about the roll tool? All right, here we have two sound bites, and we're moving the edit points of both of the sound bites. This is like editing film. You're basically rolling the edit point, hiding or revealing each of the sides of the sound bite. We have slip and slide. All right, what do these things do? Well, all right, we'll get the slip control. Now notice that we're moving the sound bite. Okay, the sound bite is being moved, but we're keeping the edit points in the same place. So we're slipping the sound bite within its edit points. Then we have the slide control. This moves the edit points but keeps the sound bite stationary. So you'll notice that as Les moves the slide tool, right, the sound bite stays stationary but the edit points are moving. So that's 4 different new editing tools in the sequence editor. Now, while we're still in the sequence editor, let's talk a little bit about automation. You have track-based automation, volume, pan, automation for your effects, and so forth. Now we also have automation that is specific to the sound bites. So if I want to go in and add automation to a sound bite and then put that sound bite somewhere else or make a copy of it, the automation is embedded into the sound bite, stays with the sound bite. Now that gives us 2 layers of automation. I've automated my sound bite, and then I have track-based automation over top of that. And maybe I'd like to do something very simple, like just change the gain of a sound bite. I can select the sound bite, go to the audio menu, byte volume and gain commands. We've got a series there. Perhaps I'd like to increase or decrease by 0.5 dB or set the number of decibels I want to boost or cut. I've recorded my vocal track too soft. I want to add 30 dB of gain to the vocal track. Okay, I've done that. That's a non-destructive edit, but now whenever that soundbite plays back, it's got 30 dB of gain attached to it. I can then add automation on top of that. That's soundbite oriented automation, and then drop that into a track and automate the track itself. So I've got 3 levels of soundbite automation. All right, what else can we do here? Well, we're in the Los Angeles area. Obviously, Digital Performer is used for film scoring. We showed you Van Helsing. We're going to show you a clip from the TV show Supernatural. All right, this is scored by Jay Gruskins on the WB network Tuesdays at 9. We have to say that, yes, Supernatural. We're going to use that for our example. And we're going to talk about film scoring, soundstage sessions, live performance. When somebody does film scoring, they're looking at a picture, they have visual cues, and they build the music around those visual cues. So on a soundstage, they'll superimpose visual references over the actual movie. So you may see things like streamers and punches and flutters. What are these things? Let's show an example of a streamer and a punch. There's the streamer. There's the punch. Now punches come from the old days when they actually used celluloid film and they punch a hole in the film. So you've got a single frame, you get that bright flash, and that can be used as a visual cue. What about a flutter? What's a flutter? Can we play an example of that? There's a monster in the background, he's going to kind of make a noise. Right, and the flutter is used to indicate in this case, the monster making his little sort of burp in the background there. So you've got streamers, you've got punches and flutters, which are a series of punches. All right, now, how do we get that overlaid over top of the movie? In this case, we're using a piece of hardware called a Pro Cue. Or you could use something called a clickstream machine, or a digital timepiece, or a video timepiece. These are pieces of hardware that you pass the movie through, and then this piece of hardware will superimpose the streamers, the punches, and the flutters over top of your video. Digital Performer is sending out commands to these pieces of hardware. For example, if I want a streamer with a punch, and I want the punch to happen on bar 7, then I need to send the information out ahead of time so that the streamer starts ahead of time early, and that punch lands exactly on bar 7. So Digital Performer is sending the commands out to the piece of hardware, which is then superimposing the visual cues. What happens if I don't have a $6,000 Pro Cue? What happens if I'm working at home? I want to do a little bit of desktop scoring? No problem. Digital Performer can superimpose the streamers, the punches, and the flutters directly onto a QuickTime movie right on the screen of your computer, and then I can export the QuickTime movie with those streamers, punches, and flutters actually embedded in the sprite track of the QuickTime movie. So now I can do this desktop soundstage work. Now, how do we get these visual cues into our sequence? Well, there's 2 ways to do it. Visual events could be linked to markers. Markers are used to locate throughout the sequence Markers also show up as text in my score view. Maybe I'm using them for rehearsal markings or specific EDL cue points. Another way to insert these visual references is to not attach them to markers, but just put them as events in the conductor track. Maybe I want a streamer or a punch or a flutter that is not associated with a marker. Well, I have that choice. Let's take a look at the preferences screen. All right, we'll go into the preferences window of Digital Performer. We'll scroll down. We have a separate preferences area for the visual cues. We can decide which piece of hardware or whether it's going to a QuickTime movie. We also can choose what color, what the duration is, how many punches in a flutter. Now these are defaults. Right, so for example, if I set white as the default color for streamers, then as I start to add the streamers in, they will be projected as white. Now I've got a streamer that I'd like to be green or blue or red. I can override the defaults with individual options, so every streamer, every flutter, every punch can be different. I start off with my defaults, and then I can further customize that if I like. And I can dump that information to a track in a standard MIDI file, and I can export my streamers, flutters, and punches out to another application if I need to do that. All right, now let's see an example of this in action. We're going to watch the film again. Now what's happening is there's two pieces of music. The first piece of music, very soft, it's in 4/4, there's sound effects going on. Then there's a pause, no music. And then the music comes back in, but much faster at a different meter. And we'll use a streamer and a punch to denote when the second piece of music comes in. All right, let's play that back. Let me turn it up a little bit. Okay, we're in the 4/4 section here. Now silence, no music. And the monster very conveniently falls out of the tree exactly when the punch happens. All right, so now we've got the streamer and the punch to show us where the next cue is going to be. But what we now need is we need a click track, right? We know where the music's going to start, but we need tempo. Digital Performer can generate a click as MIDI events, it can generate a click as audio. DP5 can generate the click as a visual reference. Right? Punches can be used, and you can see that the downbeat is denoted by the larger punch. We have all sorts of options for how we handle clicks inside Digital Performer. Right? They could be audio, MIDI, or punches. Clicks can be based on beats. In other words, quarter notes or eighth notes. You can have a tacit click. A tacit click is basically a click that's been muted. We get to that silent section, I want the click turned off for a bar or a bar and a half, however long I like. And clicks can be patterns. Maybe I want a click that is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I can set up any type of pattern I like, and clicks can be set up as events in the conductor track, so the click track can constantly change according to my needs. Maybe the tempo is slowing down and I want to go from a quarter note click to an eighth note click so that I still have the right rhythmic reference in there. All right, now let's play the clip back again. This time we're going to use the visual click, and you can see exactly how it works. Okay, we're in the 4/4 section here. She gets nervous. Tacit, right? The click is muted. Okay, we had a count off there. And if you paid close attention, the count off was 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, it's a 6/8 section, so it's giving us a count of 2 and then 2 counts of 3, and that's a count off. Right, so the click could be different patterns, but also count-offs could be different patterns. I can have as many count-offs as I like throughout my sequence, and the count-off is based on the tempo that is leading up to. Right, let's say I've got a tempo change from 60 beats per minute to 100 beats per minute, and I want to count off into the section that's starting at 100 beats per minute. Obviously, I want the count-off to be at the tempo that I'm then going to be rolling in the sequence. So I've got click options, count-off options, streamers, punches, and flutters, all new features in DP5. And you can dump that click track to a standard MIDI file if you need to export it to another application. Let's take a look at our sequence. Let's go to the tracks window. Wow, not a lot of tracks in this sequence. Actually, there are. They're just hidden inside of track folders. This is a way of organizing your tracks. We can even have subfolders. Here's my orchestral section, and then I've got the orchestral section broken down into percussion, brass, woodwinds and so forth, so we can nest the folders. This is a very efficient way of dealing with large numbers of tracks. I've got 300 tracks in my sequence. Right now I only want to work with the background vocals or just the drums, so I can hide or show any tracks that I like, both the tracks window and also inside the sequence editor. I will roll over to the sequence editor. We open up the track selector list. Option click closes up all the folders with a single operation. Track folders, new feature for DP5. What else is new in DP5? Well, we've got, oh, look at this, a meter bridge. We can look at inputs, outputs, buses, bundles. Any place that there's audio in Digital Performer, we can monitor that audio with our meter bridge, a dedicated window. Of course, this means that we can have many, many meters showing up. We're scrolling back and forth, or maybe we just like to wrap those meters around. All right, so now we're seeing wrapped meters in a dedicated window. I'm going to do some multi-track recording. All I want to see is my transport controls and my input VU. I can do that. I can set that up. But wait, there's more. This is DP5. A lot of good stuff in DP5. How about 6 new virtual instruments? All right, let's start at the bottom. Let's start with BassLine. This is a monophonic single oscillator synthesizer. Basically, it's like having a Minimoog built into Digital Performer. Right? Get some killer bass sounds going here. Brad Vinico to help us out on some of these virtual instruments. They have a little bit of that BassLine sound. Let's tweak the filters a little bit. Now it's a single oscillator synthesizer, but we have a detune function which takes that oscillator and splits it left and right and detunes it. That's fat with a capital P. Yes, okay. All right, that's BassLine, but that's a monophonic synthesizer. Cool for bass. What if I want to do pads and play polyphonically? Remember an old synthesizer called the Roland Juno 60? That was a real bridge device. It used analog oscillators that were digitally controlled oscillators. So now we have the PolySynth, a polyphonic analog synthesizer, digitally controlled. Let's hear an example of this. All right, let's play with the filters a little bit. Maybe bring in a little bit of chorusing. Okay, this is the PolySynth, but I want more expression. I want to work with different types of waveforms, not just sine waves and square waves. I want to work with different wave shapes. I want different things to be able to modulate inside the synthesizer. So now we have the modulo synth. This is also a subtractive synthesizer, but it gives us a variety of waveforms to work with and a modulation matrix. So now we can get into very expressive controls of different parameters. They can influence each other, and this gives it a lot of movement in the sound. Let's play an example of that. A little bit of phase modulation. Now, these are subtractive synthesizers. The subtractive synth works by starting out with some sort of waveform and then putting filters and envelopes and so forth on it. But that's certainly not the only way to make sound. Another way to make sound is a sampler. So we've included a basic sampler with Digital Performer. This is the nano sampler. Drag and drop a mono or stereo sample from the desktop, from a track. Right, your singer has just done that killer vocal lick, and now you want to trigger it with your MIDI keyboard. Drag it right out of the track into the nano sampler. Of course, we're giving you samples to get started with. All right, let's go ahead and play a little bit of that Moog sample. Let's adjust the sample start time. We can adjust the sample start time, the sample end time. We can set up sample loops, crossfades, amplitude envelopes, filter envelopes, LFO, detuning, modulation. We can set the polyphony nano sampler included with DP5. How about a drum module? Let's bring in the Model 12. Now this is also a sample player, and it's dedicated for drum instruments. The Model 12 allows you to load in 12 different drum sounds. You need more than 12 drums? Okay, let's bring in a second Model 12. Maybe we'll have one Model 12 for your basic trap kit, and a second Model 12 for your percussion. All right, let's hear that kick drum. I never get tired of listening to kick drums. My wife comes downstairs, she says, "You were listening to that kick drum an hour ago." Yes, but I'm still working on the EQ. All right, so there's our kick drum. All right, we can load the different sounds in. You see we're giving you all different individual samples. Of course, you can load your own drum samples in. Pre-made kits are included. You've got sample stretching. If I want to make that cymbal crash longer or shorter. Sounds could mute other sounds. I play an open hi-hat, now I play a closed hi-hat, the open hi-hat mutes. Individual sounds can be sent out through their own outputs if I want to process them on, with separate effects outside in Digital Performer. This is the Model 12 drum module. One more synthesizer. Now we talked about subtractive synthesis. There's another form of synthesis called FM synthesis, frequency modulation synthesis. Remember the old Yamaha DX7, classic example of FM synthesis. The way FM synthesis works is you start with an oscillator, and then you use a second oscillator to modulate the first oscillator. Now, low frequency modulation is where you get those filter sweeps or vibrato or tremolo. And if you use high frequency modulation, it changes the timbre, it changes the shape of the waveform. And this gives you a very unique sound. The Yamaha DX7 was a 6-operator FM synth, but it only used sine waves. Anything that you did inside a DX7 was all based on sine waves. This is Proton. This is a 2-operator FM synth that allows you to change the wave shapes in addition to doing frequency modulation synthesis. We've got a cool little display here to show you exactly what the wave shape is that you're currently playing. And Brett, can you give us an example of this? That's a very different sound than subtractive synthesis. That's much more sort of a glassy or bell-like sound. That's FM synthesis. 6 new virtual instruments included with DP5. What happens if you don't have an 88 weighted note keyboard controller and an expert keyboard player to play it? Well, we still have an expert keyboard player. We're going to bring in our MIDI keys. Nice little utility, MIDI keys built into Digital Performer. So if I want to trigger off my Mac, there I am sitting on the plane with my PowerBook. I want to get that cool Jan Hammer solo in. Just play it on the keys of your PowerBook. All right, let's listen to an example of all of these virtual instruments. We're going to play back some tracks. Brad is going to jam on top of that. Everything that you hear in the next example is being generated by the virtual instruments included with Digital Performer.